And from that, and over the period of time, I've tried to organize myself and this group of people into a service body that's developing technology, that's ultimately going to be providing some consulting services, both for businesses and education. And our primary purpose is really to serve individuals and organizations towards individuals and organizations becoming more learning-oriented. And I'll go into that a lot more as we progress, because becoming learning-oriented, I think, is what it's all about. That's what, at one level, our nervous systems already are. We're born learning-oriented. And that serves us so well as we learn to walk, and as we learn to talk, and as we learn to hear and see. And it serves us so poorly when we bump up against this wall of the way that we have organized knowledge in the world. And that interface is what we're going to talk about today, and that interface is what I'm so interested in and have been. So as I stand up here, I'd like to say that there's a lot of people with me up here, both Barbara and Risa, who made the trip, but also a number of children and people that belong to this group in California, and educators and people part of our that are part of our network that are actually distributed throughout the world now. I mentioned a few minutes ago that I make a distinction that's important to me between the empirical, the inferential, and the experiential. And that as we move along, there are going to be lots of opportunities, I'm hoping, for you to say, wait a minute, I'd like to go into that more, or I didn't quite get that, let's stop the presentation and travel into that so that we can try to better understand it. Towards that end, what I hope to do is to engage you at the experiential level, rather than, for a moment, suspend what we know at the statistical level, and speak from yourself as a learner, your experience of the last time that you were passionately interested, or even not so passionately interested, and had to learn about something. What did that feel like? What was your experience of that, both in your body and your head, as you were really trying to pursue that? What kind of problems did you have? That's the level that I think we have to have the conversation at, because that's the most authentic level. That's the level that all of you can speak from, which is not out there, which is not just a measurement system that's statistical, quantum, probabilistic. It's actual, it's real. And that's the only level that we can ever hope to get to learners with, because that's the level where learning's happening. So let me go ahead and move along. What we've got here is a Macintosh computer, which I'm using at first as a kind of a glorified slideshow. I've got some notes organized here to kind of take us through the background that's necessary to understand the technological aspects of the system I'm going to propose. And so it's a slideshow that allows me to jump around, so that rather than having to follow the slideshow can follow me. By the time we get to the end of this, I think it's going to be, we'll have an opportunity to just barely introduce the first front end of the computer-based technology stuff that I really want to share with you before it'll be lunchtime. And then we'll have to defer after that to go into the more technical aspects, or the deeper phenomenological aspects of how the technology works. But first, before going into the technology itself, I want to use the technology to spend some more time talking about learning. One of the most remarkable things to me over the past 7 years, as I've really tried to explore and look into this, is that what I call the profoundly practical significance of learning. That if you go into the business community, if you look at what's going on in systems thinking, if you look at what's going on in cognitive science, if you look at what's going on in psychology today, what's going on in educational research, what's going on in new types of government studies, the self-esteem movement, various social processes, they all come down and resolve right down to learning. They all come to the same place. So I want to kind of take a trip together into all of that, so that we get down to what I call the significance of learning, which needs to be pluralized because there's so many of them. And then from there, as we get to that significance of learning, we can start to begin the conversation that I really want to have, which is about What is learning at the phenomenological, at the deepest level inside of a human being? And then from there, how is it that we bring technology into the service of the significance of learning in the general and in the specific phenomenological aspects of learning with the particular individual? So in my travels, I've talked with executives with IBM, General Motors, Apple, Harley-Davidson, just a number of companies. And I've done about a year and a half or so of consulting in the design of learning systems for Apple Computer internally so that they could design the systems inside Apple that Apple will be using to facilitate the learning of the people that work for Apple. And no matter which of these companies you go to today, one of the things that they're really coming to realize is, whether it's IBM, who spends $1 billion a year on internal education, right? or General Motors, which is actually slightly larger, but it's much more training-based, that corporations are actually having a department head on the board level, which is now internal education. Whereas it used to be that training was somewhere down on the HR chain, it's now becoming more and more a line item to the structure of organizations. So in the business community, the research that's being done on organizational design, on organizational efficiency by these large corporations, by the universities that support them. We've met with people like Peter Senge at MIT or Chris Argyris at Harvard. I don't know if any of these names mean anything, but if you could look at it as if we've got all these major businesses, the Fortune 1000 businesses in the United States, that are really asking the question, how is it that we become more efficient? What is the obstacle to our organization moving from this past paradigm, which was very, very assumption heavy, very unresponsive to its actual business context, its people context? How is it that that system becomes more efficient? They're not necessarily pursuing the profound, they're pursuing the practical, they're pursuing the bottom line. Now, parallel to this group, you've got sitting outside of it these various universities around the world. They're asking the same question a little bit more academically, right? What is the way to design the organization of the future so as to make that organization more effective in terms of bottom line profitability, in terms of a healthier workplace for people to operate in? And so, again, at Harvard, we've got people like Chris Argyris, who's studying skilled incompetence, is one of the phrases that he uses. The ladder of inference. They're really studying how is it that an organization propagates what's meaningful in a way so that the company can be responsive to its internal and external needs. Then there's major consultants like Tom Peters, who I've met with and talked about these issues with, and Deming, who I haven't. Deming being the guy that really brought American management to Japan and helped Japan come out with the management structure that it has today. And it's really interesting that the place where all these different things agree is the significance of learning. Tom Peters has said, the business of business is learning. And I think the most powerful phrase in the bunch is Deming's phrase. And this really needs to really be thought about, because I think it's probably one of the most profound truths I've ever heard out of a businessman. And that is that the only sustainable advantage of an organization is learning. The only sustainable advantage of an organization is learning. That technologies are constantly going to change. People are constantly going to turn over. The organization itself is going to contract, and it's going to expand, and its customer base is going to change, its vendor base is going to change. All those things are variables. The only thing that the organization can do in order to maximize its opportunity to prosper and grow in the world, to really serve its customers, to better learn how to serve its customers, to better create an environment in which its employees and people can really cultivate their creativity and participate in some enlivening way. Not just for its profound reasons, for its fundamental practical reasons, is learning. That's an enormously pregnant and powerful statement. It's just beginning. We're just at the very, very, very beginning of that starting to permeate the American business climate. But it's inevitable that it will, because if you look at what is a business, you look at its overall efficiency, how is it that it's structured, that's a very profoundly true statement. And as business starts to get more and more oriented to that phrase to recognizing its need for